Hey guys, welcome back to the triple build. Now, we're going to be stepping it up a little bit here, and we're going to be looking at all three chassis together, as the chassis section is probably going to go by pretty quick, as long as I can get all the detail painting done. But it's not going to be that much to talk about here, so we're going to do all three of them at once. And as you guys are already familiar with the Fiero chassis, it's a very well molded piece. Really does not need a lot of cleanup. Just throw some primer on it, do all our painting, and call it a day. The 70 GTO, of course, is going to require lots of cleanup. As you can see, all of this flash that is on the edges of the chassis. I mean, this is just... I'm telling you, the more I work on this car, the more I see all of the work it's going to need. And now the Pontiac Super Stocker is probably going to be the most interesting one. It's got this two-piece chassis, and I'm not really even sure how all of this goes together. So we're going to have to be looking that up on the instructions and figuring out exactly what it is that we're going to be doing with this. So why don't we get started with the one that's going to need the most amount of help, which is the 70 GTO. So let's just get started with our cleanup of this chassis. Okay guys, done all the cleaning up on the chassis of the 70 GTO, which included cleaning all of this out, reshaping the transmission mount. This thing was horrendous. All of the edges are cleaned up so that it's ready for paint. There was so much flash on this. I mean, this... You hear people talk about NPC kits, and wow. And this is an original kit. This is not even a, reissue with 40-year-old tooling. This is the way it was made when it was being close to new. Or at least I think it was. We're going to have to find out when exactly this kit... I don't remember when this kit was produced. But, I mean, I'm just astounded by how much flash and how bad it is. And here we're looking at the exhaust. Gonna have to clean this up too. And, I mean, look at that. Let me give you guys a really good look at that. Look at all of that. That's just bad. So, I'm gonna get busy cleaning this up. And then this will pretty much account for the entire chassis of this particular model, as there is really nothing to it other than these two parts, and the wheels and tires. Now this just kind of, let's see if it'll even fit. No, it doesn't. I'm gonna have to clean up the holes also, because of course it doesn't fit right. But this is it, as simple as it gets. So got quite a bit of work to do here, and this is all going to come down to the painting and the detailing, because it's pretty bad. But you're going to see how cool it looks. I guess this is the fun part, where you're going to turn something like this into something that looks really, really cool. So let me get busy on that. I'm going to clean the exhaust up, and then we'll be back. Alright guys, now we have the exhaust system completely cleaned up. You can see now all of that flash is gone. Actually, it's looking like a much more modern part now, because that other stuff was just embarrassing. So everything's clean. Now it's going to look pretty good once it's painted. I think I got everything. I could do a little bit more there. But for the most part, this is pretty much done. Now what I'm working on is opening up the exhaust tips. As you can see, I've already done here. This is, can you guys see that? This is what the kit comes with. Let's just bring it in nice and close there. Don't mind my hands, they're covered in plastic dust. You get the exhaust tip, which has its downward facing opening, but it's completely solid. And this is after a little bit of work that I did to it to open it up. Still maintaining that downward face opening, but getting rid of all of that plastic that fills the opening. So the way I did that was by using my rotary tool with this bit that comes in a multi-bit, what do we call this? Rotary tool accessory kit. You can find these at Micro Center, which is where I picked this one up. It's about 12 bucks. Brings all sorts of bits and pieces that you can use. And using a combination of this pointy bit, my drill, and if I could find where I put the other one, hold on just a second, guys. Okay, it was only just in front of me. Using a combination of this bit with this bulb and the pointy bit, along with the drill, I managed to get a pretty convincing opening of the exhaust tip here. So we're going to handle that now on this side and finish this entire exhaust system and rear suspension up. There we go, guys. We have both our tailpipes opened up while still maintaining that downward facing appearance. Actually, it came out pretty cool, I think. Very happy with that. Just another small detail that nobody will ever notice. But also very pleased with how clean everything is. So these are the only two parts of this chassis. Now I do have to open up this hole here, as the suspension, as this side will not fall into the body the way it's supposed to. So got to open that up, and then we are done with the 1970 chassis. There we go. Right there. And basically that's all it takes to mount that. So these two are ready to go to paint. Now we're going to move on to the Fiero's chassis. Alright guys, it's time to start with the Fiero chassis. And this one's going to be an interesting proposition here, because we have to make the engine from the 1/25th scale MPC Fiero GT fit this 1/24th scale monogram Fiero GT, which means it may require some modification of the engine cradle and the rear axles. Since the Fiero, unlike the other two cars, the entire drivetrain is in one module in the back of the car, it's going to require a bit of re-engineering and fabricating to see how we're going to make everything fit and make it look believable. And then there comes a question of creating an exhaust system for it. So, yeah, this is going to be an interesting one to try and see if we can make this work. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out all the relevant parts that we will need to mount to the rear of the car and install the engine. So we're going to get started with that first. Oops, sorry about hitting the camera. We're going to get started with that first. Alright guys, now here we have the rear subframe, which goes mounted to the car right here. Now this is where we're going to have to figure out how to mount the MPC engine in here so that everything fits and looks correct. But before we do that, we have to figure out how we're going to mount the transmission, as this is the only model of the three that where the transmission is a separate part. Well, actually no, the 1970 GTO also had a separate transmission, if you want to call it that. So right now, just trying to figure out where exactly this mounts. We have a small slot right here in the subframe where this trans mount here, it sits right into this small slot. Let's see if you guys can see that. Give you a good look at that. There's a small notch right there. And this tab, which is the transmission mount, sits right there. And this is where what's going to hold our transmission in place. And then the axles will insert into the transmission, and that's going to line up our axles. So we need to make sure we have the transmission lined up perfectly, so that we make sure our axles are also going to line up and sit exactly where they're supposed to. So we can go ahead and install the axles into the transmission now. The axles are installed by just inserting these two pegs into the transmission. And then the axles have two small pegs that attach into the control arms. So as long as we can get this, and then the axles actually have 4 mounting points. There's going to be 2 on the back of the subframe and 2 into the control arms. So as long as we can get all 4 mounting points to sit where they're supposed to, that is really going to center our axles and keep our suspension in the proper orientation. This is where the axle is supposed to sit. Now this, combined with our transmission being in the tab, right now I can't line it up perfectly because I have my handle here that I glued in for painting the transmission, which I can take off at any time now since it's painted. But just to mock it up so that you guys can see exactly what I'm dealing with here. So that's going to hold that. So technically, once I do all the paint work and get everything set up, I can actually mount the transmission and the axles. And then the tricky part's going to be lining up this engine that's not even supposed to be in this car here. Now, the forward engine mount is here on the subframe. And this engine has one pin that was supposed to slot into the MPC engine. So once the transmission is in there, as long as this pin lines up with our transmission, we should get a really good fit of this engine and trans into the subframe. But the first thing we have to do is get everything painted up, so we're going to just start sanding everything down, cleaning them up, cleaning all these parts up, to then see exactly where we're going to go from there. So the parts that we really need are going to be the axles, the subframe, the chassis. The exhaust is going to come into play later, but we may as well get it painted now because it'll be soon enough that we'll be seeing that. And the catalytic converter, not really sure how I'm going to get that to line up. That's another item that we're going to have to work on and figure out how we're going to make this fit. So for now, just going to start cleaning all these parts up, getting rid of the mold lines, and getting them ready for paint. Alright guys, now we're on to the last chassis in our little 3-car build. And this one is probably going to be the most interesting one. As you can see, these 4 parts comprise the chassis of the Pontiac Superstocker. And I'm just going to put the instructions right here so you guys can see how it all goes together. Not really sure what to make of this. I've never built one like this before. So what I'm going to do is clean up all the parts and then assemble this chassis, and let's see where we go from here. Okay guys, these are the 2 major components of the chassis. Now one thing I wanted to show you guys is that this chassis is designed so that you can make it, so you can change the wheelbase, you know, shorter or longer. I guess it's for use in different models, as this is the basic chassis that I guess they use in other Superstockers. Don't know, this is my first one, the first one I've ever built. So, it could be the same, might be different, don't know. But there's got to be a reason that you have the 2 mounting holes for the pins. There are 2 mounting pins underneath the chassis here. Now, those 2 pins slot into the holes here. Now, as you can see, you have 2 holes, which will change the length of the chassis. So what I did was I attached the rear of the chassis to the front of the chassis, and then I just placed the body over it to see which pin designation or pin position fit better or looked better on the car. And even though if you use the sorry about that guys, if you use hole number 1, which is the one toward the back of the car, it does seem to fit right along with the shape of the chassis. Now if you use hole number 2, you can see where it extends it and it doesn't flow with the lines of the chassis. But using hole number 2 fits better with the body of the car. So I'm going to put the instructions right up here and show you guys the way it shows it on the instructions. Now, if you look very carefully at the picture, the arrow, the dotted line with the arrow on it, is extending from what appears to be hole number 2, which is the first hole, which is the hole toward the front of the car. So I'm going to guess that's where they want it, as that's where it fits better. So it could have been a little clearer with that, maybe put a note there or something, but they didn't. So we're going to glue that to hole number 2 and hope for the best. And then we're going to just start assembling the rest of the parts of the chassis, which I'm not really even sure. That goes according to the instructions. This rear section, if we look here, it just kind of slots into the chassis, sort of like that, forming a cage of sorts here in the back. I'm going to guess that that's where that's supposed to be. Even though it doesn't really show that, as it only shows the two glue points being at the front. So are these supposed to be down here? I'm guessing they are, because it just looks right that that would be anchored at the back. And then we have this piece here that goes on the rear, which is some sort of impact absorber, I would guess. But as you can see, this one is a little warped. So we're going to have to massage that a little bit to make it fit. Now, one thing about this piece is that there's no real solid mounting point here. You just kind of attach it to the rear and glue it down, I guess. Because there's no real mounting point there, and there's nothing else in the instructions about it. But it looks like this is what this whole piece is supposed to look like when it's all done and put together. And attached to the chassis there. So, I'm going to get to start assembling this, and then we'll see how it goes. Not really sure where the front part of that's supposed to go. Let's take a look, see. No, that's supposed to be up in the air. And not really sure how that's supposed to go in the back also. It shows it there, shows that there. Yeah, these instructions aren't very clear. So let's just go and start doing what we know is going to work. Okay guys, I decided to take the chassis apart because I've decided what colors I'm going to use on this chassis, and it's going to be a multicolor paint job, and it was just going to be much easier to paint everything while it's apart. So this one chassis we're not going to assemble before we take it to paint. So we're just going to put it up here right with the other ones and get ready for the paint booth. Right now it's freezing, so we're going to hold off on painting for maybe like a day or so till the weather warms up a little bit, and then we're going to start just painting everything up and getting the chassis ready. So we're going to stop right here because since painting is on hold for a bit, we're going to move on to probably some interior work on the next episode. And we're going to go right back to splitting it up to the 3 separate builds. The chassis work went by so quickly that it really wasn't worth making 3 separate videos for it. So I hope you guys appreciate the fact that we just got one going, and we're going to keep running with this. Alright guys, I'm going to end it here, and I'll see you on the next one.